The gate clanged shut like a starter pistol. Sheriff's lights rolling over the hill, kids on the wrong side of my fence clutching melting popsicles, while Karen Van Fleet pointed at me like she'd just caught a fugitive. And I stood there with one hand on the lock, calm as I could be, because this wasn't a kidnapping or some HOA emergency. This was my non-HOA driveway, and the end of a very long rope. The sheriff eased out of his cruiser, took one look at my private property sign, then at Karen's performance, and I could tell from the way he tucked a smile that he'd been here before. Yeah, that happened, and it started months earlier, when Karen decided my yard was perfect for her kids, like my grass, my pond, my goat pen or some public park. She could annex because she had a clipboard and a loud voice. At first it was cute in that suburban way. Little notes about community standards, a drone buzzing the fence line, a suggestion to integrate amenities for the good of local families. And I kept telling myself to keep it neighborly, offer water, keep the dog behind the gate. You know what I mean? But entitlement has a way of testing the hinges until something snaps. So I welded in a heavy steel gate with an auto lock, and I drew a line in a way even an HOA president could read. The next morning, a red stamped letter slid under the rail, talked about alignment and shared access and harmonizing features, which is a fancy way to say, give us your land, or we'll make your life a paperwork maze. So I drove to the county, pulled my deed, had it notarized, and the clerk, bless her, pointed at a forgotten strip on the parcel map and said, you realize their main road crosses 30 feet of your soil, right? And I just nodded, not to swing it like a bat, but because leverage is a quiet thing you hold until you absolutely need it. From there, I put up cameras along the gate and the back fence, a clean grid of truth feeding to the cloud. And the first time a man in a polo with a clipboard called himself an inspector, yet couldn't find a county badge in his pockets. The cameras blinked, the sheriff logged a trespass, and the file with Karen's name got a little thicker. The neighbors started whispering too, sliding me photocopied minutes from HOA meetings, where her handwriting spelled out acquire property and community playground. And I'm not a paranoid guy. I'm a porch coffee guy. But you don't ignore handwriting like that. Then came the Saturday stunt. Karen idled the SUV at the curb, yelled playdate, ushered her kids through my open gate for that magical window of repeated use, and when the timer snapped the lock at 9 on the dot, her script cracked. She screeched and filmed and called 911. And I just stood on my porch, narrating in a steady voice for my own videos, kids. Safe under the shade tree, with the dog water from the hose. Not a tear in sight. The sheriff arrived this time, a no-nonsense sergeant with mirrored glasses. And when I handed him the folder with deed easement clarification and letters, he read, he nodded, then he asked Karen a simple question that landed like a gavel. What jurisdiction do you think you have over a non-HOA parcel? She sputtered about community integration, about historical paths, about child safety, and the sergeant peered over the gate and asked the kids if they were okay, and they waved and wiped popsicle off their chins. And that was that. He wrote her a formal warning for trespass, told her to step behind the line, and I hit the remote and let the kids out. Small shoes, shuffling little faces embarrassed. And for the first time I felt the power flip. Not because I yelled, but because the facts were louder than the noise. She didn't stop. Of course, she never does. She papered the street with flyers, calling me a danger, marched up with 2 men in suits who swore I'd be sued for child endangerment and obstruction of community access. But when I asked for a court order, the pockets turned up empty, and they backed away with gravel spitting behind their tires. The county inspector came out next, professional and patient, looked at my clearances, checked the posts, and told her in front of half the neighborhood that my gate and my property were compliant and not under her HOA. And if there's anything sweeter than a summer breeze, it's the sound of official common sense upstaging a portable loudspeaker. I forwarded everything to a local reporter who covers HOA messes. Not to become a headline, but because sunlight clears mold. And while she fact-checked, a process server knocked on my porch with an emergency injunction. Karen filed to make me restore community access, which is a wild way to say open your gate because I say so. We went to court, and the judge, who keeps his humor dry and his calendar tighter, asked her attorney to point to any easement or agreement, and when they couldn't, he read my deed. The notarized clarification. The inspector's letter glanced up and dismissed the motion with prejudice, then warned her about sanctions. If she kept misusing the court and in the hallway, I told the camera very simply, the law works because sometimes the truth is better when it's small and undeniable. After that, the air on our street changed. Neighbors who used to peek from behind blinds started waving. The sheriff's office called me instead of me calling them. Said they were preparing a restraining order based on the pattern. Asked if I'd testify, and I said yes because there's a kind of dignity in telling the story straight. They served it one afternoon while she was trimming roses by the clubhouse 50 feet. No contact, keep it through counsel. And the quiet that fell after that wasn't revenge. It was relief. Meanwhile, the HOA board cracked in slow motion. Emails slipped under my gate, showed panic and liability. Talk, the reporter, published a careful, funny piece about the Goatgate saga that made strangers write me about their own HOA nightmares, and Karen's posts all caps, and angry started boomeranging on her. Yeah, that happened. And I didn't dunk on her. I kept working the property, planted trees along the fence line, repaired the barn roof, backed up footage each night. Because if you want a life back, you have to live it while the noise is dying out. Here's the twist. You might not expect. The final act didn't arrive with sirens, or a breach, or another showdown. It arrived with a white envelope. My neighbors were in the yard for a small thank you cookout. Kids feeding the goats behind the inner fence. When her SUV rolled up below. She stepped out, pale and stiff, stopped beyond the restraining order line. Like it burned, asked if she could leave a statement, and she set the envelope on the post and stepped back inside. Was a signed resignation. A note acknowledging my property was private and that she'd acted without authority, and a small stack of photos she'd used in her posts returned, like tools set back on a bench. After the job went wrong, I won't pretend I felt fireworks. It was more like a deep breath I'd been holding for months, finally sliding out the retired lawyer. Neighbor said, "Well, I'll be damned," and the whole yard laughed in that loose, grateful way people do when a long storm breaks, and you realize the roof held. Later that night, I walked the fence line with the dog, trotting close, touched the gate that used to feel like a barricade, and now felt like a marker of sanity. I thought about the first time she called my yard perfect for her kids, about the drone, about the fake inspector, about the judge asking the only question that mattered. And I kept coming back to the same quiet lesson: boundaries matter. But how you defend them matters more. Not with rage or showdowns, but with calm receipts and the courage to hold the line when everyone's yelling. Maybe you'd have opened the gate sooner. Maybe you think I should have pressed charges harder. Maybe you see a mother trying to carve out a playground in a town that forgot kids still need grass and bikes and shade. I get it, I really do. But there's a difference between sharing and being coerced, between community and conquest. And in the end, even the board that backed her had to face that difference in writing. So that's the story. Steel gate, a stack of papers, a neighborhood that found its spine. Not because someone shouted the loudest, but because truth, recorded and signed, wears better than a megaphone ever could. And if you were standing here with me now, you'd hear what I hear. Most nights, goats rustling, cicadas, humming. No sirens, no speeches, just a street that finally learned where the line is. If this hit a nerve, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your take. Call me stubborn or smart. Share your HOA story, if you've got one. And if you think more folks need to hear how patience beats noise, hit subscribe. Because there are a lot of us out here holding gates and holding ground.